Everyone, thank you so much for joining us for another Red River webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to maximize your Azure migration and management with Red River. My name is Gary Utley. I'm the Managing Manager. A little bit of housekeeping for this webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar or anything that pops up of interest, feel free to ask a question. All we ask you to do is go to the Q&A question on the top right, put in your name and ask the question so we can direct the answers directly back to you. We have special guests here today, Brian Charles, our design architect for Microsoft Solutions. Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Awesome. Well, Brian, so to start this conversation about the whole Azure and the cloud movement, the big question is, what is the why Azure? Why is Azure such a great solution? Excuse me.
So a lot of organizations are already using some of Azure in a lot of capacity. Some years back, as IT's evolved, I mean, we used to have physical servers and we moved to virtual servers, and then we started dealing with cloud. And recently, we've been taking a look at some of the benefits of cloud, being able to scale as your organization needs, as well as be able to provide that remote connectivity that a lot of people are finding themselves in nowadays.
Okay, so looking at the cloud solution and people are ready to get there, and Azure is just becoming that great solution for them. Like another quick question that I have and a lot of organizations have come to Red River about is, how does Azure control your organization's IT costs while providing a cloud solution for a platform to scale for scalability?
That's one of the great benefits of using any hyperscaling platform. You're able to pay for exactly what you need when you need it. If you need to upsize for whatever reason, you're allowed to scale with you and not have to worry about hardware procurement, license procurement, anything like that. Or if you need to downsize for any reason, you can turn down those assets and not have to continue paying for them and not have a whole bunch of hardware sitting in a server room somewhere.
All right, great. Well, I think that's kind of the conversation what we're having in the questions. Kind of is a good segue into your presentation about how really you can maximize Azure. So without further ado, go for the presentation.
All right, thanks. So whenever you're going to start migrating into the cloud, what you want to do is think about how you're going to migrate in the cloud and utilize some of the reference architecture out there with the cloud adoption framework. We've been migrating organizations into Office 365, Azure, AWS, other locations for several years now. And if you're really starting to make this a part of your IT strategy for 2020 or 2021, there's some things that we've done, some best practices using the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework to help you along the way. First thing you want to do is really get in there and assess what you have. Even the best IT folks, there's something inside of their environment that they're not quite sure everything that it does. So getting in there, figuring out what do I have, what's in scope, what are we trying to migrate is a very important step. Right after that, once we have all of the information gathered, it's planning it out. Am I going to start migrating more of my services into software as a service, SaaS, things like Office 365 instead of standing up an Exchange server or SharePoint Online? There's a whole host of applications out there that are readily to be utilized in the cloud, and it takes a lot of the burden off of your IT staff and even business owners. Most of us aren't in the business of IT. And we found ourselves becoming experts of IT just as a necessity. But if you can start migrating this stuff into SaaS and things like that, you can really focus in on your customer. And if there are some applications that can't migrate to SaaS, well, that's part of the planning process as well. Find those line of business applications that are important to you, find a home for them in a platform as a service solution or infrastructure as a service solution. And Microsoft has great options for that whole entire gambit of applications. Once we know what we have and what we want to do with it, let's start working into the migrate. And most of the work is already done for us at this point, because that's the hard lifting, that's the kind of the hard thing that we have to do. And migrating, there's so many tools that are out there to help migrate, that this just becomes basically just an exercise of hitting those downtime windows and maintenance windows that we talked about. One other thing that's very important that you learn how to do in the cloud world is kind of get accustomed with the new cares that you're going to have. Sure, you don't have to necessarily worry about replacing your hardware assets every 5 years, except for networking and things like that. But there's another set of cares. It's in the cloud. It's more accessible. How am I maintaining the security of that? It is extremely rare that you're paying for everything as it's running in the cloud. It's rare for your cost to come down without somebody taking a close eye on it. We got some governance issues. It's easier to stand up a server now that you don't have to worry about any procurement. So how do I make sure that our costs don't get out of whack? So learning how to manage that environment is something that we're all going to have to learn how to do. So when you're going through the assess portion, and typically you want to get a third-party utility in place to do this, and there's some third parties that we utilize, and there's also, so depending on the cloud you're going to, some first-party tools like Azure Migrate, but a great cloud agnostic tool that we utilize here as well is CloudMize. And one of the great things about CloudMize is it's sort of cloud agnostic. So sometimes you're coming to the game and you're not exactly sure where you're going to go. Like if you know you're going to go to Azure, it's still helpful because it gives you a lot of information for Azure as well. But if you're not quite sure where you want to go, then CloudMize is a great tool. So you have some agents that you can install on physical servers, and you can turn it directly towards your virtual environments, your Hyper-V environments, your vCenter servers, things like that. And it's going to go ahead and collect and gather the information. And it's going to help you right size if you were to take that asset and move it into the cloud, really drill down and give more predictable information to the accounting department or the whoever's going to have to approve the budget of this running. So what tends to happen is there is a much lower upfront cost for adopting cloud service, but then you have that ongoing management, maintenance, those fees, the pay as you go, that you need to somehow figure out how you're going to budget. You don't want to buy much more than you need, for example. And these tools help you do that and also provide that predictable performance. An example of that is if today, because it's in your data center that you own, you've just given 32 gigs of RAM and 8 CPUs because you just had it and you already paid for it, so you might as well use it. Well, if you take that exact same resource and you stick it into a cloud like Azure and you don't do any right sizing, it's going to be very expensive. So how do you right size it to what you actually need? Maybe you only need 8 gigs of RAM and 2 cores, but still guarantee that performance that you're getting today. And these tools will go ahead and help you out there. Another thing that these utilities do once you've gotten some information about right sizing and stuff like that is really help you map out some dependencies. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in the meeting is the best IT guy isn't aware of 100% of everything going on. So what it's going to do is while the agent is gathering performance data, it's also going to be gathering access data and things like that. So if you have a SQL server, you're able to drill in and figure out what are the ports, how are the communications, where's the spider web of information. Usually when you're planning a migration to the cloud, you're not really looking at servers, for example, you're looking at applications as a whole. A SharePoint server, for example, there may be, or SharePoint deployment may be a collection of 3 or 4 separate servers that are all working together to service this up to your end users or your clients or however you're utilizing that. And you want to make sure that you're moving the whole entire thing and everything is planned. So also in the planning phase, one of the great things about the CloudMize utility is it's going to allow you to put in what if scenarios. What if I were to move this application server into the cloud and left this SQL server back on-prem? You're able to kind of plan out your migration that way, as well as look at some of the things that we were talking about before, but the predictive cost For example, like what would my performance look like on this solution if I chose these smaller VMs instead of these larger VMs? So you're able to carve up all the different scenarios, spit out those reports, and get those to everyone that's important on there. During the planning phase, a lot of work goes into this. So typically we're running agents in the environment. The best practice is to do it for a month. And the reason why you want to be doing it for a month is because you want to see the ebbs and flows of that application. And most things have a hot season and a cold season. The accounting, for example, they may at the end of the month have a week where all of their assets are much higher utilized than they are the rest of the month. And you want to see how your applications are running throughout the entire life cycle to make sure that we're right sizing them correctly. So a lot of work is going in there. And CloudMize allows us to take all that planning and actually go into the next phase that we're going to talk about and not waste any of that. So CloudMize integrates directly with the migration utilities to take those assets that we're not able to move into a SaaS environment and replicate and migrate them directly into the cloud. So utilizing integrations with Azure Migrate or Azure Site Recovery, what you can do is you can actually replicate your VMs from on-prem, and you already know how they're working. They're already configured appropriately. They're already communicating properly. Utilizing these tools, replicating that data into the cloud, and using those plans that we've already built out. For example, if we said my DCs are my application servers and my SQL servers are going to have this amount of RAM, this amount of CPU, all that planning that we did to see how the performance would be, those migration files will build out VMs inside the clouds of those same sizes. So none of the work that you've done has been wasted here. And it's going to do replication near zero downtime once we are migrating, and it will actually allow you to do a proof of concept migration before you actually do migrate. So you can spin up your servers inside the cloud, log into them, make sure they're communicating properly, make sure there isn't anything that you missed, and then tear down this little test bubble that you've spun up, and then properly plan for the maintenance window that's going to be required in order to flip it over. So how that works in Hyper-V and VMware and physical machines is a little bit different. And the great thing about these utilities is it's all communication over 443. So we're not poking a whole bunch of holes in our firewalls and stuff like that. And for Hyper-V, it's utilizing the Microsoft Recovery Services agents that are built into the server. So think basically the same bits that it's using for something like a Hyper-V replica when you're replicating from one Hyper-V host to another Hyper-V host. All of the ways that works, it's still the same tool utility that it's working here. And you can replicate your Windows VMs, Linux VMs, and run that directly into the cloud. Yeah, there's a little graphic. So on VMware and physical servers, it works a little bit different. Still, the data is moving over 443, so we don't have to worry about poking a whole bunch of holes into our firewall. But there's some configuration and process servers that are going to convert the VMware machine or the physical machine into an Azure VM and get your servers migrated over as well. So in the managed phase, and again, this is a whole new skill set that a lot of people are having to learn. And over here at Red River, we can be some or all of this for you. And if you're just looking for a set of tools, we have solutions for that where we'll become your your CSP, your cloud service provider. And you'll just get an access to some tools. And one of the main tools that we utilize there is Cloud Checker. And Cloud Checker is great for a whole host of reasons. One of them, it is also cloud agnostic. So if you have an AWS environment, an Azure environment, you can grab all those logs, bring them into Cloud Checker. It is going to be giving you some security best practices and some spending optimization to help and stuff like that. And we, for additional managed services, have the ability to take all the information that's pulling back and also be your eyes and ears into the cloud, as it were. So for things are invoice subscription management, things like that, governance, data protection, resource capacity planning. When is the right time to get some reserved instances and stuff like that? Or maybe get some policies set up to turn these servers off or shrink their footprint after hours and stuff like that to maybe save some money, help you out with hybrid benefits, and then the security best practices. So both the utilities inside of AWS or Azure, they're going to have their security best practices and management, but you'll also be able to see the industry best practices inside of Cloud Checker, where it's going to be alerting your service desk or alerting our service desk if we're taking that on for you, letting you know when something's changed, setting up alerts for, hey, there were some resources that are stood up and there wasn't any tagging on them and things like that, and we need to make sure that our governance is being followed. Or, hey, there's a machine over here that isn't being protected by a backup or anything like that. So sort of having your eyes on your cloud and making sure that if something were to occur, we would be able to take care of that for you. I'm going to pivot just a little bit and talk about access. So Windows Virtual Desktops is it's not new, but it came out, I guess, in general availability in the last quarter of last year. And we've been talking about VDI for many years, and what's ended up happening is some of the VDI promises, unless you're very closely really zeroed in industry, the promises of VDI in a lot of instances didn't really come out the way we thought. And then there's some industries that were able to use VDI, and it's been fantastic for them. But there's a little bit different when you're talking about using a hyperscaler for your VDI, because a lot of the cares that you had to worry about when you're building it on-prem, you don't have to worry about when you're offloading that into a platform like Windows Virtual Desktop. So before, I need to get all flash storage, and I got to have 10 gig networking, and then I have to build out high availability inside of this and all of that. You don't really have to worry about that anymore utilizing this platform. And for your line of business applications that you're not able to move into SaaS, it's sort of the perfect complement to the modern desktop. So Windows Virtual Desktop is really one of the best experiences that you're going to get when you're delivering desktops from the cloud. And there's a lot of reasons for it. What Microsoft has actually done that's a little bit different than everyone else, and the reason why they were able to do this is because they actually own the operating system. They're the ones that built Windows, is you're actually running Windows 10 in the cloud. For anyone who's familiar with multi-session machines in the past, like a Citrix or Remote Desktop or Amazon Workspace or something like that, you don't really have a Windows 10 computer. What you actually have is a Windows 2016 server or whatever version it is with the desktop experience installed. One of the difference between Windows Virtual Desktop is you're actually running Windows 10 native, and that means your applications, if they work on Windows 10, they're going to be working and supported on Windows Virtual Desktop. And a lot of the features that are only on the desktop, you'll be able to use, like known folder move in OneDrive and things like that, that you haven't previously been able to use inside of these. Also, that platform is managed by Microsoft. So I don't have to really worry about getting a security certificate and worrying about a DDoS attack or something like that, and high availability. All of that is going to be taken on by Microsoft, and we're able to come in and then take the other part of it for you. How am I going to get my golden images update? How am I going to make sure that there's new applications, or I'm having some performance issues and I need to change the scaling, auto scaling logic and stuff like that, and we can go ahead and help that. So The end user experience is fantastic. There, you could choose whatever platform you want. So Windows, obviously, Android, iOS, Mac OS. There's even an HTML5 experience. So if you don't have anything installed on the local machine, you can simply fire up a modern browser, go to the website, log in, and you're working on a Windows 10 desktop inside of a browser, and a Linux application is coming for it soon. And again, like I was saying, that local it's like the local Windows experience, because it actually is Windows, and all that connectivity you don't have to worry about. And this integrates directly with all of the security features and functionality that we've already set up. So if you have Azure MFA enabled inside of your Office 365 tenant and things like that, we're able to turn that on for Windows Virtual Desktop and use your already enrolled users into the MFA to go ahead and gather additional protections on it. Microsoft purchased a company called FXLogix to help out with profile management. So if you've put into these pools, if you've put in pools instead of dedicated desktops, and users are going to be logging into a different computer every single time they hit it, the experience is going to look the same no matter which server that they're hitting in the background, and all that is managed through that platform there. And there are some enhancements that Microsoft is building into the platform because it realizes there's other utilities that they may be using. So audio and visual inside of a virtual desktop has always been an experience that there's additional extra things that you have to do, because what you don't want to do is you're streaming this session, you're logging into this session and you're streaming it. So now if you want to get a Teams meeting or something like that, you're basically double streaming, and there's in the past have been performance issues there, but Microsoft is working, and it's in preview now, the Teams enhancements where inside the virtual desktop, it is actually redirecting audio and visual to your local device, and you're able to have a peer-to-peer communication in Teams. So even though you're logged into your Windows Virtual Desktop, you're getting that on-premises look and feel of those applications there that use those audio and video. And again, Microsoft has put so much emphasis on security. We're moving our stuff into the cloud now, and how it's out there, and how do we make sure that it is controlled? And we already talked about a lot of it before. So we have multi-factor authentication that we can enable. We have the detailed logging and analytics that Microsoft is providing for us. The reduced attack surface, because again, I don't have to worry about those DDoS attacks. That's Microsoft's job to worry about. You've got granular RBAC controls where you can give various people in your environment, hey, make them an administrator of Windows Virtual Desktop, so they can control that solution without giving them access to everything inside of Azure. And then you have isolated user sessions as well. So we actually do have a managed service on top of that as well, and it's for those things that day two of getting VDI inside of your environment. So day one is the project, the testing, the planning, all of that, and now you just add moves and changes, pool assignments, dedicated machines. Like maybe you found the user inside your environment who they're not going to be able to join a standard pool, and they need to have a dedicated machine, or you need to add graphics inside of it. If you have some design architects inside of there who are doing CAD drawings and things like that, there's options for us to give capabilities for that sort of thing. So all of that day two stuff of the managing, maintenance, and thing, we can go ahead and offload for that. Offload that for you as well if you want. And that's basically what we wanted to go through today. Really going through that cloud adoption framework of how do we start migrating into the cloud, making some decisions on where we're actually going to put, planning out that migration, doing it, and then managing it afterwards, and then providing additional ways that your users can work with the tools and applications that you're providing to everybody. I think you muted Gary.
Sorry, guys. Brian, thank you so much. That was a lot of information around Azure and how we can help support organizations get to the cloud in a good way. So we want to jump over to the questions. We have a really good question, kind of specific to the educational field, but it talks about, so we have Microsoft Office 365 Education A3 license. To prevent cheating, many universities make us use Safe Exam Browser integrated into Moodle. I don't know if I said that right. If we integrate our Moodle into Microsoft Teams, can we use SEB directly with Teams? And second question is, or is there plans to arrange integrations with SEB into Teams? Long question. It's in there right if you need to like reference to it.
Yep, I see that, and unfortunately I don't have the answer on the top of my head, but this is absolutely one of the follow-up questions that we can get back to you. We do a lot of work in the education space, and especially since March, February timeframe, we've been working with universities and schools systems all around the country. So if you do have some very specific education needs, we'll be able to get those questions answered for you and follow up later.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll definitely reach out to this person individually and go answer that question. We just had a second question come in today. We have VDI and applications in Azure. We had a provider spin up workloads in Azure last year, though we think we're being overcharged in data usage in the cloud. Can you guys check out our data pricing?
Absolutely. This is one of the things that I was talking about. Cloud costs tend to almost always go up, and that's why we employ some tools like Cloud Checker and things like that. So we have a lot of years of experience in AWS and Azure at this point of taking a look at what you need in the cloud, looking at some analytics and information that we're pulling back. Cloud Checker is going to help us with that to show you with actual data of your compute that is being it's oversized, your storage, like if, oh, hey, look, I have all this storage over here that's not attached to any VM and stuff like that. So it's absolutely something that we can help with. And then we can even provide those utilities for you long term if you want to be the one to manage this going forward, or if you want us to take that on for you.
All right. Yeah, great answer. Hopefully that answers that. But if you have any more questions, we would love for you to contact us. Brian, thank you again for thank you so much for coming and giving us the Azure spill over the cloud and being here for this webinar. We really appreciate it.
I think there's one more question in there.
Oh, yeah, it popped in. Okay, sorry.
Okay, yes. So so the question is, with schools, do we have SharePoint expertise? Absolutely. We have we have just moving files for collaboration expertise. We have building out intranets and process workflows expertise. So chances are what you want to do with SharePoint, we have past experience and performance in the education sector.
Awesome. Way to get that last question in. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up for us, guys. Thank you again, Brian, for coming on today. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. Go to our website, redriver.com. We will be also sending a recording of this webinar to everybody who attended. And thank you again. Thanks again, Brian.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.